Hey everybody, it's time to talk about fraud again. Larry Finney here. In the last video, we spent some time talking about trust versus skepticism and how we can use that in our organizations. Today, what I want to do is to begin to dive into the 2024 report to the nations that was published by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Some really good information in here. They looked at almost 2,000 fraud cases. Today, what I want to do is focus on victim organizations and what we can learn. So what I'm going to do is share some data and information with you from the report, and then we will briefly talk about what we can learn from that and maybe how we can use it. So of those almost 2,000 fraud cases, 42% occurred at private organizations, 26% at public companies, 17% at government organizations, and 10% at nonprofit organizations. The report includes a list of specific industries, about 22 of them. So suffice it to say, fraud occurs everywhere, in every industry. The median losses ranged from $550,000 in the mining industry to $200,000 with government and public administration organizations. $85,000 in religious and charity organizations to a low of $44,000 in the arts, entertainment, and recreation industry. One thing the report does point out is that there's not a big difference overall in the size of the organization versus the percentage of fraud cases that occur. One reason for that may be simply that smaller organizations don't have as many people and sometimes have a more difficult time segregating duties the way they would like, and that could be one of the causes. Overall, across all industries, corruption was the number one scheme for committing fraud. But let's talk a little more specifically about government and nonprofits, especially government organizations, because there's more information in this report. So they looked at 296 cases of fraud in government. 42% were national, federal, 29% state, provincial, 23% local, and 1% other. The average duration before the fraud was detected was 12 months. The most common schemes were after corruption were billing, non-cash, and payroll. 39% of the government fraud cases were caused by employees with a median loss of $50,000. 39% were by managers with a median loss of $224,000, and 19% were by executives with a median loss of $313,000. Probably no surprise there that generally the higher the level of authority, the higher the loss of the fraud. 40% of the time that fraud was committed by someone who had been with the government 1 to 5 years, 31% by someone who'd been there 10 plus years. So the length of time doesn't necessarily seem to have a big impact on who commits the fraud. And then on the nonprofit side of it, they looked at 57 cases. And the one thing they point out is that after corruption, again being the number one fraud scheme, the next three were billing, expense reimbursements, and simply stealing cash on hand. So as I finish for today, I want to start off by stating what I know is going to be obvious to most of you, and yet many of us still fall victim to this thought process. And that is that fraud's never going to happen in my organization. And that's exactly what the people who commit fraud want us to think. So let's do a couple things. First, let's kick that line of thinking out of our minds. Fraud can happen at your organization. And so instead, what we need to think is let's be vigilant, let's continue talking about this, and know that fraud is a possibility in our organization just like it is everywhere else. So today, let me share kind of a couple thoughts, maybe plans of action for you to think about. And a lot of it is just around encouraging you to continue to keep the risk of fraud in the forefront of people's minds in your organization. One great way to do that is to simply plan regular meetings so you can continue to educate, simply talk with people, share information, share this information so that people can see that yes, fraud does happen everywhere. And as we in later videos talk about who tends to commit fraud, what are the schemes, how is it typically detected, you can continue to share more information with the people in your organization and keep it in the forefront of their minds. So thanks. I hope you have a great day as you continue planning and meeting.